You may find this hard to believe, but sometimes the brightest spotlight hides the darkest pain. In the history of American show business, there exists a list few have ever dared to expose. A list of black celebrities who died from AIDS without ever being able to tell the truth. Not because they didn't want to speak, but because they were never allowed to. Being black, being famous, and living with a disease once condemned as a moral sin. Those three realities became a living hell. Forced into silence, trapped in fear and shame, they fought alone, and many died that way. The 23 stories I'm about to reveal will expose what the public was never meant to know. These were stars who lived under blinding lights, yet passed away in the cold shadow of a secret tied to the disease of the century. Their stories were buried, their names protected, and the truth erased. Until now, and you won't believe who they are. Howard Rollins. Howard Rollins was a screen icon who slowly faded away after months of hiding a devastating illness in silence and despair. Once, he stood as one of American television's brightest stars, his talent and quiet charisma burning through the screen as Virgil Tibbs in the heat of the night. With refined, disciplined performances, he embodied integrity and courage, becoming a symbol of strength and justice for millions of viewers. Emmy wins, an Oscar nomination, and a string of unforgettable roles lifted his name to the very top of Hollywood's elite. But behind the glow of fame was a tragedy few ever saw. On December 8, 1996, Howard Rollins died quietly in a hushed hospital room at St. Luke's, Roosevelt in New York City. He was just 46 years old, his body ravaged by relentless illness. The skin that once radiated confidence on screen had grown pale, etched with pain and exhaustion. In the months leading up to his death, Rollins had all but vanished from public view, living alone in a modest Harlem apartment. He gently turned down acting offers, blaming fatigue, while secretly enduring recurring fevers and infections that tore through his weakened body. In his final hours, only his mother and sister sat beside him, keeping a silent vigil. He passed away on a cold morning, as faint music drifted from an old radio, stirring memories of a life once filled with promise. Officially, his death certificate listed lymphoma as the cause. But the truth was far more painful. Howard Rollins died from complications of AIDS. Few people knew that by the mid-1980s, Rollins had already contracted HIV, a consequence of the crushing pressures of fame, drug use, and the excesses of Hollywood's party culture. In those reckless years, he shared needles, unaware that the virus had found its way into his bloodstream. It quietly consumed his health for years, until the full force of AIDS emerged in the early 1990s, a time when treatment options were limited and hope was scarce. Raymond St. Jacques. Raymond St. Jacques, the elegant icon whose death from lymphoma concealed a far more devastating truth. He was one of the rare black actors embraced by Hollywood at a time when racial prejudice still ruled the industry. With commanding performances in films like Cotton Comes to Harlem, especially in his unforgettable role as Coffin Ed, he carved out a legacy defined by authority, intelligence, and undeniable presence. His deep, resonant voice, refined manners, and fiercely private life set him apart. Untouched by scandal or excess, he was widely regarded by colleagues and admirers as the very definition of a gentleman in the arts. On August 27, 1990, St. Jacques was discovered motionless on the sofa of his Los Angeles apartment. A half-finished glass of wine rested nearby, soft jazz still drifting from the stereo. A close friend, at first assuming he was asleep, grew uneasy when repeated calls went unanswered, and then realized the truth. Just days earlier, St. Jacques had declined a television role, blaming persistent fevers and lingering sores on failing health. No one imagined the condition was fatal. In his final months, St. Jacques chose isolation, quietly withdrawing from the world. He stopped returning calls, keeping contact with only a small circle of trusted friends. Most days were spent alone, watching old films, as if retracing the path of a life once lived in full light. Though he always appeared composed and immaculate in public, his body was being silently destroyed by HIV, a secret he had carried since the 1970s, following brief same-sex relationships within the entertainment world. At his family's request, lymphoma was listed as the official cause of death, though physicians understood it was the final consequence of AIDS. He hid his illness his entire life, driven by a deep fear of judgment and rejection in an unforgiving era. His funeral was dignified and well-attended, filled with mourning colleagues and friends, while the truth of his suffering was laid to rest with him. Larry Riley. Larry Riley, the beloved TV star who died far too young from AIDS-related complications, hid a devastating truth behind one of Hollywood's warmest smiles. He was one of the brightest, most reassuring faces on American television, leaving a lasting impression as C.J. Memphis in a powerful soldier drama before winning over millions on the hit series Knots Landing. With kind eyes, effortless charm, and a natural, grounded presence, Riley inspired trust and affection the moment he appeared on screen. No one could have imagined that on June 6, 1992, he would quietly pass away at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center at just 39 years old. Hollywood was left in shock. Only days earlier, he had still been pushing himself to film, despite a body that was clearly giving out. That day, he collapsed at home from respiratory failure, rushed to the hospital with lungs barely functioning. Doctors fought desperately to save him, but it was too late. In his final months, plagued by relentless coughing and severe weight loss, Riley insisted it was nothing more than chronic bronchitis. Determined to protect his dignity, he concealed the truth until the very end, even from close colleagues, continuing to work, forcing that familiar smile while every step drained what little strength he had left. The reality was far more painful. Riley had contracted HIV in the late 1980s during a brief same-sex relationship he never spoke of. At a time when HIV was wrapped in fear, shame, and brutal stigma, silence felt safer than honesty. He learned of his diagnosis in 1991 as pneumonia became constant and his weight dropped rapidly, yet he chose to suffer quietly. In the hospital, his wife and children never left his side, holding his hand until his final breath, trying to preserve a sense of peace amid unbearable pain. After his death, AIDS complications were confirmed as the cause, but his family kept it from the public, determined to protect the image of the gentle, radiant man America had come to love. Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey, the dance legend who carried his deepest secret to the grave. An irreplaceable giant of American modern dance, Ailey founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and lifted black dance onto the world stage. His work was never just movement. It was testimony. A cry for freedom, a portrait of pain, and a declaration of hope for a generation long ignored. Ailey was more than a choreographer. He was the heartbeat of a cultural revolution. On December 1, 1989, Alvin Ailey drew his final breath at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City, officially succumbing to severe anemia. He was only 58 years old. Few could believe it. This was a man who led his company with the fire and stamina of someone decades younger, a force that seemed unstoppable. Before his hospitalization, Ailey lived alone in a modest apartment near the company's headquarters. He continued to appear at rehearsals, offering artistic guidance even as his body betrayed him, hands trembling, skin drained of color, collapsing on the studio floor from sudden fainting spells. He brushed it off, insisting he was simply exhausted from working too hard. But the truth was undeniable. His body was shutting down. Relentless fevers. A failing immune system. Every warning sign was there, yet he refused to stop. In his final days, Ailey filled his journal with sketches and ideas for future performances. Most would never be realized. His strength was gone before his vision was. As death approached, his closest dancers gathered around his bedside, singing softly and sharing stories from the company's earliest days, as if love and memory alone could keep him with them a little longer. The public was told he died from a blood disorder. But the truth, revealed later, sent shockwaves through the arts world. Alvin Ailey died from complications related to AIDS. He had contracted HIV in the 1970s, during a time of artistic freedom, crowded New York parties, and fleeting one-night connections, long before the world understood the virus or how to protect against it. In an era when AIDS was shrouded in silence and shame, Ailey chose secrecy. Perhaps he feared the stigma. Perhaps he wanted the world to remember his brilliance, not his vulnerability. But eventually, the truth emerged, adding a final, tragic layer to the story of a man who gave everything to his art, even his life. Max Robinson, a television legend brought down by a disease no one dared to name. His name once reshaped American television forever. As the first black anchor of ABC World News Tonight, Max Robinson shattered barriers and became a living symbol of courage, brilliance, and relentless ambition. Night after night, millions welcomed his voice into their homes. Then, on December 20, 1988, that voice was silenced. Robinson collapsed at a cafe near his home and was rushed to Howard University Hospital in critical condition. Gasping for air, burning with fever, his chest clenched in relentless pain. Doctors fought to steady his breathing, but his strength was already gone. He died shortly after. When pneumonia was announced as the cause, the media world reeled. How could someone so powerful, so alive, vanish so suddenly? The devastating truth soon surfaced. This was no ordinary illness. Max Robinson had died from complications of AIDS. Physicians believed he contracted HIV from an untested blood transfusion in 1983 during surgery after a car accident, at a time when screening protocols were dangerously inadequate. From that moment on, the disease quietly consumed him. In his final years, Robinson retreated into a small apartment, fading from public view. He turned down interviews, avoided appearances, and told the world he was simply resting, when in reality he was shielding himself from a society poisoned by fear and prejudice toward those living with HIV. His body withered, his face hollowed, his once commanding voice reduced to a whisper. At the hospital, his ex-wife and children came bearing books on Black history, the one comfort he asked for in his final hours. Max Robinson's death sent shockwaves through the media not only because an icon was lost, but because he became one of the many victims of an epidemic shrouded in shame. He chose to die in silence, without explanation, without spectacle, and without asking for pity. Bobby DeBarge, a once-in-a-generation prodigy, brought down by a disease that cast a shadow over an entire era. Bobby DeBarge was the heart and soul of the legendary R&B group DeBarge, an unmistakable icon of the 1980s. His angelic falsetto, electric stage presence, and natural gift for songwriting carried him straight to the top of American pop culture. Songs like I Like It and All This Love flooded the airwaves, turning his voice into the soundtrack of a decade. Yet the glow of fame could not pull him back from the darkness of addiction or from the illness that terrified the world. On August 16, 1995, Bobby drew his final breath in a hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was just 39 years old. His body was completely ravaged, frail, skeletal, his skin pale and marked with sores, almost unrecognizable from the star fans once adored. For years, he had lived in silence inside a rundown rental home, severed from friends, family, and the music industry that once worshipped him. The R&B angel had vanished. In his final years, Bobby made fragile attempts to return to the studio, arriving with half-written lyrics and unfinished melodies, only for pain and weakness to halt every session. His family remembered him sitting for hours in quiet reflection, replaying old DeBarge records, especially I Like It, his eyes distant, trapped in memories of brighter days. Few knew that Bobby had contracted HIV during the height of his fame in the 1980s, the same period when heroin tightened its grip on his life. At late-night Los Angeles parties, the drug became a deadly companion. During group injections, he unknowingly shared a needle with a close friend who later died from HIV. No one imagined that single moment would seal his fate. After learning of his illness, Bobby chose isolation, determined to protect the people he loved, terrified of passing on the disease. His family kept the truth hidden for years to preserve his image, but eventually the secret surfaced. AIDS claimed Bobby DeBarge, but the deepest tragedy was not how he died, it was how he left this world alone, forgotten by an industry that once celebrated his voice. Willie Smith. Willie Smith was a fashion legend whose life was ultimately claimed by the most feared disease of his era. His name carried weight across the fashion world. As the founder of Willie Wear, he revolutionized American style by fusing street culture with refined modern elegance. With an instinctive eye and fearless creativity, Smith rose as one of the most influential black fashion icons in U.S. history, collaborating with industry giants and commanding runways from New York to Paris and London. But behind the success, darkness crept in quietly and unexpectedly. In April 1987, just days after returning from a business trip to India, Willie Smith was rushed to a New York hospital suffering from relentless fevers, violent coughing, and a body that was rapidly shutting down. Not long before, he had been the life of extravagant parties in his sleek Manhattan loft, hosting celebrities, artists, and tastemakers. Then suddenly he disappeared. Invitations were declined. Phone calls went unanswered. Friends who finally saw him were alarmed by his skeletal frame, ashen skin, and exhausted, hollowed face. When pressed, Willie downplayed it, blaming an infection he picked up overseas. The truth was far more devastating. He had contracted HIV through same-sex relationships during the excess-fueled party scene of the 1980s, at a time when AIDS was misunderstood, stigmatized, and rarely spoken about. In the hospital, friends brought him sketches and design ideas, hoping to spark joy or even a miracle. None came. On April 17, 1987, Willie Smith died at just 39 years old. Official records cited pneumonia, but everyone knew it was a curtain drawn over a far more painful reality. His death sent shockwaves through the fashion industry. A brilliant light extinguished, exposing the deadly silence surrounding AIDS in the creative world. Yet Willie Smith did not vanish into history. His vision lives on. His designs still inspire generations, proving that even in death's shadow, true brilliance cannot be erased. Essex Hemphill. Essex Hemphill, the black poet who slipped quietly out of the world, leaving behind a trail of unfinished words. He was a towering force in America's black arts movement, far more than a poet. Hemphill was a relentless voice for black dignity and LGBTQ+ liberation, wielding language that was sharp, fearless, and unflinchingly honest. His poetry didn't comfort America. It confronted it, dragging long-buried injustices into the light. During the darkest years of the AIDS epidemic, his work found its way into major literary anthologies, etching his voice permanently into American literature. On November 4, 1995, Essex Hemphill was found unconscious in his small Washington, D.C. apartment. There was no breath left in his body, no familiar clacking of his aging typewriter. Only chaos remained, scattered manuscripts, unfinished poems, half-born stories strewn across his bed like thoughts interrupted mid-sentence. 4 months, he had quietly endured raging fevers, skin infections, and crushing exhaustion. Yet Hemphill chose silence. He turned inward, refusing hospitalization, unwilling to surrender his final days to a cold hospital room. He wanted only to write, to stay in that cramped apartment that had become his last refuge, his final claim to freedom. Few knew that his tragedy began years earlier, in the late 1980s, during a long-term relationship with another gay writer. His partner, also an activist, did not know he was carrying HIV. At the time, information about HIV/AIDS was scarce, often ignored or deliberately silenced within black communities. They lived, they loved, and they unknowingly stood in the shadow of death. By 1993, when sarcoma bloomed across his skin, Essex learned the truth. He had AIDS. 2 years later, at just 38 years old, he was gone. A singular talent faded quietly, leaving behind a profound and painful absence in American literature. In the room where he took his final breath, absolute silence reigned, replacing forever the steady rhythm of a poet's typewriter. Marlon Riggs. Marlon Riggs, the brilliant filmmaker who carried the century's deadliest disease in silence until his final breath. One of the most fearless and visionary documentary directors in American cinema, Riggs gave voice to black and gay communities when America refused to listen. Through groundbreaking works like Tongues Untied, he shattered taboos and forced buried truths into the light. He was an icon, a devoted professor at UC Berkeley, and an unyielding warrior for honesty and dignity. No one imagined that such relentless strength would be overtaken by the era's most feared illness. In April 1994, Riggs was rushed to an Oakland hospital in critical condition. His lungs were ravaged by pneumocystis pneumonia, an AIDS-related infection signaling the disease's final stage. Almost no one knew how close he was to death. Family, colleagues, even his students were unaware. Until then, Riggs still appeared on campus, teaching, writing, and editing, even as his body weakened and Kaposi's sarcoma lesions spread across his arms. He never lost his warm smile or commanding presence, though every step was a silent war against pain. Riggs learned he was HIV positive in 1991 after months of exhaustion, fevers, and immune failure, likely the result of a brief relationship with a San Francisco activist in the 1980s, a time when AIDS was clouded by ignorance, stigma, and terror. In his final months, Riggs poured every remaining ounce of life into Black Is. Black Ain't, his most personal and powerful work. From his hospital bed, he filmed, edited, and wrote as friends carried in reels of film and handwritten notes, feeding the fire of a man racing against time. On April 5, 1994, Marlon Riggs took his last breath. Beside him, his camera remained, silent, unwavering, a witness to a passion that never died. Alan Wiggins. Alan Wiggins, the baseball phenom swallowed by an HIV storm, was once one of the fastest, fiercest talents in American baseball. With blistering speed, sharp instincts, and an all-out style of play, he lit up the field in the jerseys of the San Diego Padres and the Baltimore Orioles, two MLB powerhouses. Everything pointed toward greatness. Legend status felt inevitable. But behind the roar of the crowd, his life began to unravel in ways no one imagined. In 1991, at just 33 years old, Wiggins died in a Baltimore hospital. The end came suddenly, brutally. He was admitted after days of raging fevers and severe blood infections, his body so drained he could barely stand. By then, he was living quietly in a rented suburban house, far from cameras, far from stadium lights. No one called him a star anymore. No contracts. No headlines. Just a man coughing blood every day, refusing hospital visits, convincing himself that rest alone would save him. What no one saw was the storm already tearing through him. Wiggins had been carrying HIV since the 1980s, contracted during a period of heavy drug use that followed injuries and relentless pressure to perform. At after-game parties, needles were shared, no questions asked, no awareness of the danger. Ignorance, recklessness, and a toxic party culture turned a rising icon into a casualty of a cruel era. He didn't learn the truth until it was almost too late. In his final days, his mother and brother stayed at his bedside, bringing old photos of him flying across the field, desperate to anchor him to his happiest moments. After his death, Yaya Hospital confirmed AIDS-related complications as the cause. His family asked for privacy, hoping the truth would fade quietly. But some stories, no matter how painful, refused to stay buried. Glenn Burke. Glenn Burke was once a baseball phenomenon who lit up stadiums and helped create one of sport's most joyful gestures, the iconic high five. Playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers and later the Oakland Athletics, he carried the promise of stardom, speed, and swagger. But that promise was slowly crushed by prejudice in a sport that wasn't ready for truth. After becoming the first MLB player to come out as gay, Burke was quietly pushed aside. Contracts vanished. Teammates drifted away. Even family ties unraveled. In his final years, the man who once heard roaring crowds wandered the streets homeless, drifting between decaying boarding houses. He was often seen near Candlestick Park, standing silently outside the stadium, staring at the lights that once shined for him, longing for a game that had turned its back. He tried to return to baseball, but declining health and the industry's cold indifference made those hopes impossible. On May 30, 1995, Glenn Burke was found dead in a cheap San Francisco boarding room. The powerful black athlete was reduced to skin and bones, his body marked by Kaposi's sarcoma, brutal evidence of end-stage AIDS. He died quietly, alone, without family at his side. Burke had contracted HIV in the late 1970s during a relationship in San Francisco's Castro district, a place he turned to for freedom but where tragedy followed. He never knew he was sick. In his final days, only a handful of friends from the LGBTQ+ community brought him food, comfort, and human warmth. When doctors confirmed the cause of death, fear rippled through those friends, a stark reminder of a disease that haunted an entire generation. Glenn Burke left this world in silence, but his story became an indictment, a painful wake-up call for a sport and a society that punished difference instead of protecting its own. Theodore Wilson. Theodore Wilson collapsed on set from complications of AIDS. A familiar face on American television throughout the 1970s and 80s, Wilson was beloved for his roles in Good Times, That's My Mama, and What's Happening. His warm charm, effortless humor, and approachable presence made him instantly recognizable to millions of viewers. On July 21, 1991, tragedy struck. At just 47 years old, Wilson suddenly collapsed while filming and was rushed to UCLA Hospital in Los Angeles. He arrived burning with high fevers, struggling to breathe, his body ravaged by severe infections. At first, many assumed it was just another on-set medical emergency. But behind the scenes, Wilson had been carrying a devastating secret for nearly a year. He was battling AIDS. Even as his health deteriorated, Wilson refused to stop working. Between takes, he relied on an oxygen tank, quietly fighting for breath. When questioned, he dismissed the concern, blaming seasonal allergies. Few suspected the truth, that the illness stemmed from a same-sex relationship with a television producer in the 1980s, during a time when HIV was poorly understood and stigma was relentless. His death sent shockwaves through friends and colleagues. His family chose to conceal the true cause, hoping to protect the image he had worked so hard to maintain. Yet for fans, Theodore Wilson would forever remain Sweet Daddy, the man who brought laughter into their homes, right until the very end. Ron Richardson. Ron Richardson, the hushed farewell of Broadway's golden voice amid the AIDS nightmare. He was a true Broadway phenomenon, blessed with a deep, commanding voice and an emotional force that could silence a theater. His portrayal of Jim in Big River earned him a Tony Award and cemented his place as a crown jewel of black musical theater. But on April 5, 1995, the music stopped. Richardson died at just 43 years old in a Bronx hospital after a long, hidden battle with AIDS. Admitted in critical condition, his body bore the marks of Kaposi's sarcoma, clear signs of end-stage disease. Even a year earlier, as his health rapidly declined, he stubbornly pushed through rehearsals, clinging to the stage as his last lifeline. He endured pain, breathlessness, and exhaustion, brushing it off as the cost of ambition. Only his family knew the truth, that he had been fading since 1993, when the symptoms first appeared. No one ever confirmed when he contracted HIV, though it was believed to have occurred in the early 1980s through private same-sex relationships he never spoke about. Fear and stigma within the industry kept him silent. When he passed, an open script and Big River posters rested beside his hospital bed, as if he still believed the curtain had yet to fall. Kevin Peter Hall. Kevin Peter Hall, the giant behind Hollywood's most unforgettable monsters, and a death wrapped in silence. Standing an astonishing 7 feet 2 inches, Kevin was a once-in-a-generation actor, the man who became legends like the Predator and Bigfoot in Harry and the Hendersons. You may not have known his face, but in the 1980s, his presence was the heartbeat of sci-fi cinema. In 1991, everything changed. After what seemed like a minor car accident, Kevin was hospitalized and expected to recover quickly. Instead, his condition spiraled. Pneumonia set in. Fevers wouldn't break. His immune system began to collapse, leaving doctors confused and alarmed. Then came the devastating truth. After months of unanswered questions, physicians concluded that Kevin had likely contracted HIV from a contaminated blood transfusion following the accident in 1990, during a time when U.S. blood screening still had deadly gaps. For months before, he'd brushed off a constant cough, assuming it was nothing more than a stubborn cold. On April 10th, Kevin Peter Hall died at just 35 years old, cradled in his wife's arms, a family photo resting by his bedside. His cause of death was kept quiet, but the truth eventually surfaced through whispers from hospital staff. Kevin Peter Hall died of AIDS, a tragic, heartbreaking end to an icon who spent his life hidden behind a monster's mask. Sylvester. Sylvester, the disco legend who once lived in rooms flooded with light. The unmistakable voice behind You Make Me Feel, Mighty Real, Sylvester was an irreplaceable icon of disco and a shining symbol for the LGBTQ+ community. With flamboyant fashion, explosive stage presence, and a voice unlike any other, he made the world dance without fear or apology. But on December 16, 1988, that light dimmed. Sylvester was found motionless on his bed in the very apartment where laughter, music, and joy had once echoed. Posters still covered the walls, a vinyl record continued to spin on the turntable, but his body no longer answered. His best friend and manager collapsed in tears. Just months earlier, Sylvester had still taken the stage in dazzling makeup and flowing silk scarves, carefully hiding his darkened skin and the Kaposi sarcoma marks on his arms. He brushed it off as the flu, though those closest to him knew the truth. Since 1985, Sylvester had known he was HIV positive, a consequence of his vibrant years in San Francisco's electric club scene. He never complained. He fought quietly with dignity. The weekend before his death, friends gathered around him, sensing the end, softly singing his greatest disco anthems as he smiled faintly. Days later, Sylvester slipped away in that apartment. His ending gentle but piercing, the final glow of an icon who lived fully, fiercely, and forever on the dance floor. Jermaine Stewart. Jermaine Stewart, the R&B star who suffered in silence. He electrified the music world with "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off." His soaring voice, fiery stage presence, and fearless individuality crowned him an R&B icon of the 1980s. But by 1997, the lights had gone dark. On March 17th, in a Chicago hospital room, Jermaine took his final breath. His body was ravaged, skin sallow, eyes dulled by relentless liver failure. Years earlier, he had quietly disappeared from the spotlight, retreating into a modest South Side apartment, far from the fame that once defined him. Whispers followed him. Close friends murmured the truth he refused to confirm: AIDS. By 1995, the signs were impossible to ignore. Shows were canceled. He collapsed in recording studios. The once vibrant star grew withdrawn, lost in memories of glamorous nights in Los Angeles and New York, parties where he loved freely, laughed loudly, and unknowingly contracted HIV through fleeting, unprotected relationships. In his final days, as machines hummed softly around him, his mother wept at his bedside, bracing herself for the loss of her son. Jermaine Stewart died with his illness kept from the public, a secret he carried to the grave, though to those closest to him, the truth had long been heartbreakingly clear. Phonce Mizell. Phonce Mizell, the brilliant architect of soul and funk, met a sudden, haunting end that few saw coming. Known as the musical mastermind behind timeless collaborations with the Jackson 5, Marvin Gaye, and Smokey Robinson, Mizell helped shape the very heartbeat of the Motown sound throughout the 1970s. On July 15, 1989, his brother made a devastating discovery. Phonce lay motionless on the floor of his Los Angeles home studio. The room was eerily still. His body had gone cold beside a mixing board that was still running, cassette tapes scattered like unfinished thoughts frozen in time. In the months leading up to his death, Mizell had complained of relentless fatigue, aching joints, and recurring fevers, symptoms he brushed off as nothing more than the cost of overwork. The truth was far darker. He was living with HIV, a diagnosis revealed only after severe exhaustion and dramatic weight loss could no longer be ignored. His partner, a singer with a troubled, drug-using past, had likely transmitted the virus unknowingly. At a time when the music industry barely understood AIDS and fear outweighed facts, Mizell chose silence. He hid his illness and worked himself to the brink, pouring what strength he had left into his craft. In his final days, he sat alone in the studio, replaying old recordings, searching for inspiration, perhaps for one last masterpiece. His death was officially attributed to a prolonged illness, his dreams left unfinished. Yet within the music community, quiet whispers spread, carrying a truth the world was not yet ready to face. Hank Gathers. Hank Gathers was a rising basketball prodigy whose dream died on the hardwood. A Loyola Marymount sensation, he was widely expected to shake the NBA with his explosive athleticism and raw dominance. But on March 4, 1990, in the middle of a roaring crowd at Gersten Pavilion, Hank threw down a powerful dunk, then suddenly collapsed at mid-court. The arena froze. Cheers turned to stunned silence. Rushed for emergency care, his heart stopped just minutes later. He was only 23. In the weeks leading up to his death, Hank had complained of chest pain and severe shortness of breath during practice, yet he refused to sit out, unwilling to miss his moment. Official reports pointed to a heart condition, but those close to him later revealed a devastating truth. Hank had learned he was HIV positive in early 1990. Terrified and overwhelmed, he kept it secret, pushing his body as if nothing had changed. Teammates recalled seeing him bent over, gasping for air during final practices. He lived quietly in a dorm room, taking medication as his strength slowly faded. His partner, a female fan with a history of drug use, was believed to be the source. Medical records listed arrhythmia, but whispers of AIDS surfaced later, shocking the sports world. Hank Gathers wasn't just a star taken too soon, he was a once-in-a-generation talent swallowed by the deadliest disease of his era, just as his dreams were taking flight. Willie Hutch. The tragic end of a Motown genius. Willie Hutch was a powerhouse songwriter, producer, and singer, the creative force behind some of Motown's most unforgettable moments, from the Max soundtrack to iconic work with Marvin Gaye and the Jackson 5. But on September 19, 1992, Hutch took his final breath in a Dallas hospital after fighting a quiet, devastating war. His lungs were destroyed by severe pneumonia, his body so frail he could no longer stand. For nearly a year before his death, he never stopped creating. Inside his modest Dallas home, Hutch would sit with a guitar, softly crafting soulful melodies and lyrics, masking his suffering behind a hardened exterior. Few knew his body was being slowly consumed. In 1991, after months of relentless coughing, shortness of breath, and crushing fatigue, doctors first suspected chronic pneumonia. Then the truth emerged: AIDS. During the reckless 1970s, Hutch had been swept into the alcohol-soaked, no-strings-attached lifestyle of Los Angeles' entertainment scene, a chapter that likely sealed his fate. In his final days, family members brought in old recordings and placed a guitar beside his hospital bed, a last symbol of the music that defined his life. Officially, his death was listed as pneumonia. But those closest to him knew the deeper truth: a brilliant talent quietly worn away by AIDS. Melvin Franklin. Melvin Franklin, the legendary Temptations bass voice, met a haunting fate long after the spotlight faded. His deep, unmistakable sound helped build Motown's empire, anchoring timeless hits like My Girl and Papa Was a Rolling Stone. But on February 23, 1995, the music world was shaken when Franklin died at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Rushed in after a stroke, his body had already been quietly collapsing. For nearly 2 years he had vanished from the stage, retreating to a modest home in Baldwin Hills, fighting relentless infections, dramatic weight loss, and crushing headaches. He blamed high blood pressure, but the truth was far darker. His family later confirmed Franklin had contracted HIV in the late 1980s through brief, anonymous romances. By 1993, he knew he was dying, living in constant exhaustion and fear, keeping his illness hidden from the public. Official records cited brain failure, but only those closest to him knew the real cause. AIDS had already ravaged his body long before the stroke took his life. Irish Grinstead, the girl from 702 who never got the chance to grow old. A founding member of the hit R&B group 702, Irish was a rare young talent, blessed with a soft, unmistakable voice and a musical identity far beyond her years. She looked like a teenager, but she sang with the soul of someone twice her age. Tragically, on April 20, 2008, Irish died in a Las Vegas hospital at just 28 years old. She had been admitted in critical condition, burning with high fevers, dangerously underweight, her body marked with unexplained bruises. Doctors later identified the cause as Kaposi sarcoma, a cancer linked to advanced AIDS. The news stunned everyone who knew her. According to several reports, Irish contracted HIV back in 1993 when she was only 13, following a minor surgery after an accident. The blood transfusion, likely untested at the time, carried the virus into her young body, silently changing the course of her life. In the year leading up to her death, Irish grew weaker. She missed rehearsals, complained of exhaustion, and blamed it on anemia. Her 702 sisters believed she was simply worn down by life and work. No one imagined her body was already in the final stages of AIDS. In her last days, Irish was confined to a hospital bed, painfully thin, listening to music, writing in her journal, and still dreaming of returning to the stage. At just 28 years old, fate cruelly closed the curtain on her life, leaving behind a voice, a legacy, and a heartbreak that still echoes today. Eazy, the godfather of gangster rap, gone to AIDS. Just weeks after his diagnosis, the ruthless mogul who founded Ruthless Records and launched NWA to the top of the charts was fighting for his life. In March 1995, the hip-hop world was stunned when he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Days earlier, he had collapsed in the studio. Doctors said his lungs were ravaged by severe pneumonia, his immune system completely shattered. The verdict was final: end-stage AIDS. His body broke down at terrifying speed. Only weeks before, he was full of energy, still moving through the streets with confidence. Now he lay motionless, unable to stand. Eazy had contracted HIV through an unprotected, reckless lifestyle during rap's golden era, and discovered it far too late. In his Cedars-Sinai room, his NWA brothers came by, sharing memories of where it all began, while Eazy could barely respond, nodding in silence. On March 26th, at just 30 years old, he died with his Compton cap resting on his chest, a symbol of an entire generation. His sudden death sent shockwaves through hip-hop, sounding a brutal warning about HIV and AIDS the culture could no longer ignore. David Peaston. A terminal illness silenced a once golden voice. David Peaston had moved audiences with raw emotion, capturing hearts through Two Wrongs Don't Make a Right, and earning a Soul Train award that marked him as a true force in R&B. His future seemed limitless until February 1, 2012. That morning, his sister discovered him lifeless in his St. Louis bedroom. The piano was still. The singing had ended. All that remained was an open Bible and unfinished sheets of music. David was gone. In his final years, he lived quietly, rarely seen, occasionally singing in church. Few knew that by 2011, his body had begun to betray him. He suffered drastic weight loss, crushing fatigue, and painful sores that refused to heal. David believed it was diabetes, but those closest to him felt something far more serious was unfolding. The truth stayed buried. David had contracted HIV in the late 1990s through a relationship with a female singer whose life was marked by addiction and constant movement. By the time he learned the truth, it was already too late. In his final days, he remained confined to his room, slipping further away as his family prayed beside him. He could no longer respond. His death was publicly described as the result of a long illness, but those who knew him confirmed the reality: AIDS had claimed the legendary voice. These stars once lived under blinding spotlights, celebrated as icons, only to fade quietly into the shadows, so quietly that even the truth about their deaths had to be hidden. Do any of these stories make you reflect on your own youth? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear them. And if you're ready to uncover more untold truths behind celebrity lives, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. What we reveal next may forever change how you see your idols.